going to talk about Saudi Arabia. You could go to other podcasts for that. We're going to explicitly, on purpose, avoid the topic of the plane. We're going to talk about the what's afterwards. But as far as the whys, I don't care. And people who are watching on video are going to freak out because I got the Golden Knights shirt and a Flyers hat. But I am a hockey fan also. And, of course, Craig is looking dapper than most people can ever handle in a day. And he's got a Batman tie on top of that. That's enough of the great fashion caca. By the way, when people ask how you're going to treat Bryce Harper when he roots for his home team, there's your answer right there. Shut up. I am the above average comedian, Nick Alchico. With me is Craig Legons. We're going to get right into this. So, like I said, we're going to skip right over the plane thing because there was a whole debacle that we're purposely skipping over. But because of said debacle, there are superstars that did not get home and did not get back in town in time for the SmackDown live show that night. So WWE called an audible, and what an audible. And I would like the WWE to, I can understand planning things ahead of time and getting things going like that, but man, when you got to light a fire under somebody's ass, like you and I and many of others said for years now, waiting for the show to engage itself into something good again on a regular basis, when you got your ass over the fire and you got to perform, you get gold. And we had one of the best SmackDowns in about a year, probably even longer. The NXT superstars. I'm going to say superstars. A lot of those guys I know, a lot of those guys I don't know, but you and I have seen on the indie circuit for 10 years or more at this point. I drove Keith Lee to a show once in Virginia, picked him up from the hotel, drove him. I told that story a couple episodes ago. Drove him in torrential monsoon downpours from DC to Virginia and back again. MJF on AEW, my car. By my how being talented does not keep you in the back of cars very long, does it? But Keith Lee was there, and then they went to Raw. And I will say, some things happened last week, both because of wrestling and which trickled down to other things. And I needed to take that week off, so I literally watched Raw and then didn't watch anything until my friend Aaron, and you were talking about it as well, we're like, NXT's going to SmackDown. I'm like, well, I guess I'm watching SmackDown. And I wasn't disappointed. And like I said, it trickled over into Raw, where the lead up to Survivor Series is in high gear already. People are attacking people. Matches that you'd never think you'd see were happening on SmackDown. That's going to come into a play later as we get closer to Survivor Series, which is looking to be one of the best Survivor Series in about 10, 15 years, give or take a few. Not only that, we got a women's war games starting, courtesy of NXT. I will say this, the last 2 weeks, WWE TV has been much better than AEW, and I'm just going to throw that out there right now as a general statement. Craig, NXT is on the big shows now. We're a week into this now. How do you feel about it?
I feel great about it. It's a shame that there had to be an airline Middle East debacle for this to happen. This could have easily been done earlier when NXT had stars like Bayley, Sasha, Charlotte, Asuka on its roster to invade. But misfortune is always another person's treasure, as it were. Yeah. And the hats off to the NXT. Adam Cole baby divulged on social. They told him he was wrestling Daniel Bryan an hour before showtime. He had basically no idea what was going on. And the same goes for most of the NXT talent. When the word came out that half the roster was still overseas in Saudi Arabia, which may or may not have been Vince's fault. It was his fault. Um, but that again, that's opened the door for the NXT takeover, as it were, and for people who weren't familiar with the NXT wrestler, you've heard the name NXT over and over again if you're a fan of just WWE TV in general, but now you're getting to see these wrestlers, and a lot of people are seeing him for the first time. What I love most about the live crowd, the way it was responded to everyone. I mean, Adam Cole's entrance, which is very interactive for fans of his, but took place in upstate New York. There was a very loud boom when his entrance hit, and it was a great response for the aforementioned Keith Lee and for Matt Riddle and for Shayna Baszler. But you also had to understand that at least 1 million people, though, had never seen these people before, and they made a great impression. Especially Adam Cole, baby, who was the NXT champion, and how catastrophic it would have been had he not gone over, or had he not gone over clean, to put it that way. Daniel Bryan is at a point right now in his career. He's on a Cena, Randy Orton type level, in that a clean loss isn't going to hurt him at all.
Nope.
And going to do nothing but elevate Adam Cole, baby. And he, for a guy who an hour beforehand had no idea that he was even who he was wrestling, or that if he was wrestling, he outperformed himself. And like a great adage, if you're always ready, you never have to get ready. And the NXT folks were ready. And my only caveat, Dan, you talked about a women's war game coming on at the end of SmackDown, where Triple H, because it really is all about him. Let's not forget who's really
Sure.
That we had the participants of the women's war game standing side by side. I know they had to play a united front on being NXT and all, but the women were going to be competing against each other, that were standing side by side in the ring on SmackDown, and which was a great photo opportunity. But that was my only caveat. The last thing I'll say about Triple H, the one good thing he did do, the backstage segment with him, Shawn Michaels, and Daniel Bryan, was very good.
Very good. Somebody pointed this out. Well, a bunch of people did, but I can't remember the initial account that I saw pointed this out. That segment at the end of SmackDown where they were all in the ring, and you were saying everybody was standing side by side. But somebody pointed out, if you look at Ciampa, he never takes his eyes off of Adam Cole and the title. He is dead ass staring at him the entire time.
He's still in character.
Unbelievable storytelling. We could harp on how bad or good WWE has been the last 5 years, but we can all agree that almost 90% of the time NXT is better storytelling than the main shows, especially recently. And man, was that telegraphed beautifully, and so beautifully that I didn't even notice it the first time. And then you go back, you're like, oh damn. I guess I lost my train of thought. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up about those shows? I forgot. Oh, I remembered the Shayna Baszler, Becky Lynch segment on Raw. I know I still see Shayna Baszler getting heat, unwarranted X-Pac heat levels from people on social media and watching the show. I don't get it myself. That was one of the best segments of the night, if not the best segment of the night, was Shayna Baszler sitting face to face with Becky Lynch. My God, that was handled beautifully. That's just my opinion. I think it needed to be said. And I think that's setting up a triple threat. And then, of course, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, I agree with you. Just having those two even in the same in the same shot or even in the same room is enough of a main event. They could have built that up. I know the whole idea was the element of surprise, but if they had built that up a little bit, a little teaser of both of those, 4 horsewomen versus 4 horsewomen, that could have even done a bigger. And not that they can't, but for their first meeting on television, a little history lesson would have been nice. But still, it was awesome in an awesome effect.
I will say this, that they've used it a bunch of times for these one-on-one interviews like this, but when the camera doesn't move because it's set up shot for these kind of interviews, and you just see something walk on screen and sit down, that still works. Because I was watching going, oh, all right, here we go. And let's not forget, getting past all that show that we won't mention that happened before that incident we won't really talk about because it was Vince's fault and it's all about money. Don't kid yourself. We have a new Universal Champion in Bray Wyatt, something I never thought I would say again, something that the man doesn't, you and I would debate it as well, doesn't necessarily need, but there he's the world champ. Well, he's the Universal champ again. That's insane. That I don't care that if it was a make-do from the absolute cluster effery that was the end of HIAC, Hell to Hell, but they gave it here's the title. I don't care what show it was on. They gave the title. I'm happy.
As am I. I'm happy for Bray Wyatt. I'm happy for a guy who came onto the scene at gangbusters and as part of the Wyatt family. His character was single-handedly head and shoulders above everyone else, and at times everyone else on either show. He was the most over character on either show. He had the best promos on either show, best mic work. Always great in the ring. I mean, the guy, his pedigree is unparalleled, third generation. So he knows the business inside and out. I was worried about him being, part of the injury bug brigade, where he right in the middle of a really good push, he'd get hurt. But the way they've used him sparingly, and I said that this was the first. You lost me with Bray Wyatt. I threw dirt on him after the first Zowie Wowie.
Gotcha.
The fun house, I think really they're doing this to this guy. It's like it's this generation's Red Rooster. They're just gonna completely bury him. And this stupid but I know he's in that Rhodes, Mulligan contingent that even if he's sticking with the strike, he's gonna make it work. So yeah. Him being a kid's talk show, a kid's host those were his yellow polka dots. So I know he's going to take it and run with it. And it's a testament to him and testament to, I hate saying this about any show, testament to the writers for how they strung it along. Almost since the Firefly Funhouse first premiered, and they didn't beat us over the head with it. It wasn't every week. It was picks and shots with drips and drabs. We saw a little bit of the darkness, a little bit, and then it would come out, and then a little more. And none of the segments were overdone. And then got here at the end of the one pay-per-view, random targets: Jerry Lawler, Finn Balor, and Mick Foley, and next thing you know, it's something. And now people are waiting to see when he's going to have it again. That the music is god awful. I have to mute it because it scares the living crap out of who.
No.
Yes. Okay, but because WWE does such a great job, like of again the booking of it coming out of nowhere. You don't know when the music's going to hit. You don't know. It's not like the Attitude Era, when someone was getting a beat down or something, a segment was going on too long. You're waiting for the glass to break, or you're waiting for if you smell. There is no prime for this. There is no, it can happen. It happened during the middle of a match. It can happen at the end of a segment. It can happen at the end of a pay-per-view, and could not have happened to a better person than Bray Wyatt, who's definitely earned it. I would have liked to have seen Bray versus Brock or the Fiend versus Beast in some way, shape, or form. Not that we couldn't for WrestleMania, but this is a great starting point for Bray Wyatt and the Fiend to build on this. Hopefully, a longer run than the last time he was champion.
Yeah, I was. I was on board for the beginning just because of how silly it was. I understand, validate 100% where you're coming from on that, though. What the fuck are they doing with this? I hate this. Why? I get it, and I'm glad you came around on it because it's funny. One of the things you mentioned was it not happening every week, and it's funny you bring that up because people will always say, why are they doing the same thing? Why is it happening? Why? And then immediately turn around, why is this not happening again? Where's Bray Wyatt? I loved the fact that they didn't do that every week and they didn't beat you over the head with it because, as you said and indicated how you didn't like it at the beginning, that could have gotten really old really quick doing it on both Raw and SmackDown every week, every single time without fail. Thank God they didn't do that. Because it'd be like, all right, we'll move on. We're done with this. And they didn't. And that was the best thing they could have done. Having him come out randomly in that mask, the mask reveal. I'm telling you, man, I've said it on the show before. He keeps up in the game, whether it's part of the written down or any of his ideas. Every time you're thinking about, okay, well, he could have been cool, but they ruined it. Now he's champion. Boom. Before we get into the very long, because I decided I needed a time away from wrestling for about a week to reset, wrestling historian, I wanted to bring up something that you brought up earlier, and that is we've been together now for 40 years. No, we've been together now for 10 years. 10 years. Randomly one night at a Kevin Smith Q&A, an evening with Kevin Smith at the Miriam Theater in Philadelphia. I'd known about you for a while because of Preston and Steve and the work I did with them. And you were doing, basically, we were both doing work for the same place and we hadn't met up yet. Meeting up? That's not a word. We haven't met up yet, but we were both online friends because, oh, you work with them. I work with them too. We were friends in that way. We communicate. And then one day we go to Kevin Smith and I knew you were there because you asked a question about how he feels about writing race into his scripts. I remember the question, and I remember the answer. And as I was waiting for Mr. Smith, who I did meet later on that night after you had left, I got a picture with him. He was very nice. Everything Kevin Smith you want for Kevin Smith, just he's like, I don't care. Take a picture. I just got to get in my airplane. It was so weird because I was kind of hiding it in the entranceway like a thug on a street, waiting for somebody to pass by to jump them. And you're walking by with two ladies, and I said, hey, what's up, Craig Legons? As you walked by, you were like, who are you? I'm Dan Colachico. Oh! Thus, we were born. Our partnership was born. Ironically, I've been podcasting for 10 years. And this show has been on since 2012. So I started in 08, 09 at podcasting, Tony Lane Show. My Moby Dick, as Dean calls it. And so it's an anniversary year at sorts. And now, cut to years later, I teased you for about a year and a half about getting on this show. And I finally pulled the trigger, and I haven't been happier. Because even when wrestling sucks, and I'm like, I don't want to do the show this week, except for my, last week I was like, I can't do the show this week. I always have to look for the segment we're about to get to in a second. But thank you, Craig, for sticking by me.
Thank you for recognizing me, Dan. This was in 2009. It was 10 years ago, so I was barely with the show for a year. And still only known to me, only on the radio. So I think, well, that's one of the caveats, one of the part about being a Q-list radio personality, that no one knows who you are in person. They can hear your voice, but the fact that you knew who I was and you, Craig Legons, it's like, who the hell knows me here? And
Look on your
turn around,
face.
you think, yeah, it's priceless because someone knows who I am, really, and they're not a friend of mine, and I'm not paying you. Then yeah, and he said you were Dan Calachico, and right away I knew because I've seen your name every single day, on associated with Preston and Steve, and I think, oh my god, and I had a picture taken, my friend Dave, and I sent a picture I had of I was with two ladies, Julie and Leslie, and one of my best friends, Dave, and between the four of us there are six kids altogether. None of them are mine, but Julie's got twins, Dave's got a boy and a girl. Leslie's in a committed relationship, but that was that was our Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice because Dave and Julie had dated. I went with Julie was a fourth Leslie, and I went to Kevin Smith together. And the irony of irony is, Dan, 10 years we've been friends. We've met 10 years ago today, and tomorrow I'm going to a Kevin Smith show right here in Philadelphia.
Oh, the Reboot Roadshow, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome. Actually, it's funny because you have that picture where, for some reason, I wish we could merge the two images and fix it up because I have a different version where we're both lit correctly.
Yeah,
but your
my
eyes are
version
closed.
sucks.
Yeah, but your eyes are closed, and I'm like, I look like such because we got the picture in mid laugh.
Yeah,
and I actually
I always thought you were. Yeah, I thought you were standing too close to me. That's why everything was so dark. It's like you get to stand back, you get more light.
yeah,
Like you absorb my dark.
So I'm also rotund, so I absorb a lot more. Now, with that being said, I want to thank you again for not jumping away from this strange fat white guy in the corner of on the random street in Philadelphia in front of a theater. And yeah, I'll never forget your face, Craig Lott. Yeah, who the F is asking? Dan called you. Oh, thank God I'm not dead.
He never said that. It was an honor to meet you then, and I can't believe it's been 10 years that I would meet one of the greatest people I've ever known. One of the most loyal, funniest, gifted, intelligent, smartest people I've known, and in 10 years. And Dan, as you know, is when in the radio biz, friendships don't really last that long. It's a very cutthroat business and filled with a lot of egomaniacs and narcissists. But you and my friend are the best of them.
Thank you. I thought when you said the intelligence and the greatest, you were going to go, and I'm talking about me meeting you meeting me. There's always a hook with you, so I was waiting for it.
No, it's been a genuine pleasure. And anytime you ask me to come on the show, I was always honored.
Yeah, I appreciate you sticking with us.
What they were. Thank you for having me. Seriously, and you were the first person I thanked when I got my own podcast. Because if it wasn't for me being a guest on your podcast, I didn't know what podcasts were. I didn't know how they worked. I was always looked forward to being a guest so I can say my thing and then leave. I never wanted my own podcast. I thought who the hell would care what I think? I couldn't talk to myself by myself, and I never wanted my own podcast. But the fact that I have one now, thanks to the people that we both know, thanks to the radio show that we both worked for or worked with, but I could not have done that without you. So thank you.
And with that being said, it is time to take the show over.
Welcome, wrestling fans. And I call you wrestling fans because this is a podcast. We're going to go back time. When wrestling was wrestling and not sports entertainment, where titles were actually called belts, and pay-per-view matches had pay-per-view quality matches. There's going to be a recurring theme in this extended version of Wrestling Historian. Little things that don't seem like a big deal at the time, but would later become huge. And this is also a pay-per-view heavy wrestling historian segment. So please bear with me. We're going to go back to October 23rd. And on October 23rd, 1945, Dan, an article in the St. Louis Dispatch, hometown of one Preston Elliott, the St. Louis Dispatch published an article noting that a former sports writer, Sam Muchnick, would be acquiring a wrestling and boxing promoter's license, a license for boxing and wrestling. Sam Muchnick would later go on to be one of the greatest promoters in professional wrestling history, to the point where the nucleus of the NWA would be in St. Louis. The headquarters of the NWA would be in St. Louis, and under the Sam Muchnick rule, the NWA would be the largest governing body in professional wrestling for a good 45 years. So much so that the WWF was a member of the NWA. And St. Louis, under Sam Muchnick's promotion, would be the only one of the only places in the United States where NWA, AWA, and WWF wrestlers could be seen on the same card. All this happened under Sam Muchnick. It was Sam Muchnick who championed the career of Harley Race. It was Sam Muchnick who got behind both Funks, Dory and Terry. It was Sam Muchnick who created the Missouri Heavyweight Championship as a way to gauge future superstars and future world champions. The Missouri State Championship became the de facto intercontinental title of the NWA. Former or current Hall of Famers wore the Missouri State title, and wrestling in St. Louis would be the heart of wrestling. It would be the nucleus of the NWA. 1945, Sam Muchnick got his promoter's license, and in 1948, the NWA started. And from 1948 till when he left in 1975, the NWA was the NWA. It was the he's been called the Pete Rozelle of professional wrestling, but always forward thinking, always looking out for new talent, always trying to make his product better, and had the respect of every wrestling promoter all over the country, everyone from Eddie Graham to Vern Gagne to Vince McMahon Sr. So, but Sam Muchnick got his wrestling promoter's license October 23rd, 1945. One little thing turned out to be something huge. Staying on that date, October 23rd, 1991, WCW Halloween Havoc is going to be a theme here again. Hulk Hogan defeated Ric Flair in a retirement match in a steel cage by special guest referee Mr. T. But the big story in this match took place afterwards, after Hogan beat Ric Flair. Go figure. A masked man who attacked Brian Pillman earlier came to the ring and jumped Hulk Hogan. Hogan got the upper hand and took off his mask, and lo and behold, it was Brutus Beefcake, who wasn't Brutus Beefcake because WWE owned that name, so they had to call him everything but. Bobby Heenan, always the great Bobby Heenan, said he has butchered a friendship, so I know we'll call him the Butcher. And that'll last for about 5 minutes, and then because before that he was Brother Brudai and then the Booty Man, but then he became the Butcher for a couple minutes, and then he was Man with No Name when he turned backface, and then he was Zodiac. Yes, no, yes. But yes, having the name that you're known for nationwide not be your own is going to be a tough sell. But yeah, the Butcher was born October 23rd, 1994. October 23rd, 1999, back in ECW Arena, it was billed a returning ECW heavyweight champion was coming back to ECW Arena. And people thought it might have been the Sandman. But the swerve was it was actually Mikey Whipwreck came out earlier that in the card and was defeated by Mike Awesome. But during the Raven and Tommy Dreamer teamed up to go against Just Incredible and Lance Storm, the Impact players, when Dreamer was getting torn apart, lights went off, but who should appear in the balcony but the Sandman, who at this time was in the WCW wrestling as Hardcore Hack, and he returned to the ECW arena, much to the delight of many of the fans there who got their return, that they wanted to return to the Sandman. Also, kind of overlooked on that card was a incredible 30-minute draw between Rob Van Dam and Sabu. But that was a great overall card.
How did Amber magically get on your lap in between that, talking about that story? That's crazy. Like, all of a sudden, she appeared.
This is all CGI.
Oh, it's not really there. Good.
October 23rd, 2000, sad day. Rodney Anwahi, part of the great Samoan lineage of great wrestlers. He started his career as Coquina Maximus, and later on the Samoan Savage. Always had a great flair for the biz and growing up in the biz, and he was the son of one of the Samoans who was not a wrestler but part of the Samoan family. But on tour on overseas tour in the WWF in England, Rodney Anwahi died at the age of 34. You may know him in the rest of the wrestling world. We know him as Yokozuna. Passed away at the age of 34. Only the second man ever to pin Hulk Hogan for the WWF Heavyweight Championship, and a two-time WWF Heavyweight Champion, managed by Jim Cornette, Mr. Fuji, and just a really well-liked guy behind the scenes. I think one of the classiest things I've seen after the death of Yokozuna, the next time he wrestled on television, The Undertaker wore a Yokozuna t-shirt, which I felt was great. But they were close, and everyone who had any dealings with Rodney Anwahi was the better person for it. And October 23rd, staying on that date, October 23rd, 2008. I rarely use TNA when I do Wrestling Historian. TNA is rarely a part of that. Not that they weren't a great company, that they didn't have great angles and great wrestlers, but I wanted to highlight this part because this happened on a TNA pay-per-view. I forget the name of it. I don't think it was Bound for Glory. But October 23rd, 2008 was the debut of one of the most underrated stables in wrestling history. You know, everyone knows, of course, about, you know, the Horsemen, the Freebirds, the NWO, DX, and underrated stables. I would like the Varsity Club. I don't think get the respect it deserves, but this club really I thought could have been something, and was this October 23rd, 2008 on TNA was the debut of the Main Event Mafia. Hall, Nash, without the Sting. Outside of Hall and Nash, I thought this had the makings of a good heel stable that, you know, you have great main event player. I mean, a great name. You had great players. You had great talkers. Obviously, Nash and Hall's best days were behind the cred that they did have, and the fact that they could recruit other members, and they later on did, like Samoa Joe, like AJ Styles. It could have had legs, but I included them in the Wrestling Historian because this is one of the more underrated stables, in my opinion. October 26th, I'm not speaking of underrated. Now we're going to get into the segment of Wrestling Historian where we talk about the best of pay-per-views. And you're going to notice the theme here. October 26, 1997, WCW Halloween Havoc. The third the third match on a 9-match card will turn out to be one of the greatest matches in pay-per-view history, not just WCW, but in all of wrestling. For the Cruiserweight Championship, the Cruiserweight title held by Eddie Guerrero going up against the Mask of Rey Mysterio. The Rey Mysterio Eddie Guerrero match at Halloween Havoc still resonates as one of the greatest matches, pay-per-view matches, and just one of the greatest matches, period. Lost in the original Brock Lesnar attack on Rey Mysterio 2 weeks ago. Rey was wearing a jacket that commemorated his match with Eddie Guerrero since it was the 22-year anniversary.
That's right.
On one sleeve it said Rey, and the other sleeve it said Eddie, and on the back it said Halloween Havoc 1997. This match, if you haven't seen it, folks, Halloween Havoc 1997. Again, it was the third match. Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero was the best match on that card and one of the best matches of all time. Eddie, even if you see it on the WWE Network, there's a documentary called The Flight of the Cruiserweights. And we have some of the greatest cruiserweights of all time, even who are heavyweights now. We're talking about their cruiserweight careers in WCW. And both Eddie and Rey talked about their match at Halloween Havoc. And Eddie Guerrero, the late great Eddie Guerrero, said, "There's one match I can look back on and say I wouldn't change a thing. It's that one." So,
Wow.
22 years ago, October 26, 1997, Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero, and it's still my favorite Eddie Guerrero-Rey Mysterio match ever. Also, October 26, happy belated 41st birthday to Phil Brooks, a.k.a.
Hey.
CM Punk.
Nice.
Yeah.
He's coming back.
October 20. What?
He's going to be coming back, before it's too long.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and he's still relatively young and just turned 41, so he can still make an impact on some wrestling organization. If only there were a few out there. It's a shame there's just one. But yes, happy belated 41st birthday to CM Punk. October 27th was a big day in professional wrestling history. October 27th, 1987. Team of Strikeforce, Tito Santana, and Rick Martel would defeat the Hart Foundation for the WWF Tag Team Championship. Interesting note that Rick Martel won the bout by making Jim Neidhart tap out to the Boston Crab, the exact same move that Rick Martel lost the AWA Heavyweight Championship to 2 years earlier. That was now Strikeforce. Rick Martel had never used the Boston Crab to win any of their matches, but when they went over for the title, I think it was something that Rick Martel said to Jim Neidhart and Bret Hart that he wanted to go over using the Boston Crab, and lo and behold. October 27th, 1990, WCW Halloween Havoc 1990. I'm going to forgo the main event of Sting defeating Sid Vicious. Actually, it was Sid who originally pinned Sting, but it turns out the Sting he pinned wasn't Sting. It was Barry Windham dressed up in Sting makeup, and Sting emerged in the back with rope being around his arms and waist. Apparently, he'd been taken hostage by the Horsemen, and he somehow escaped the ropes to come back in the ring, confront the fake Sting, namely Barry Windham, and defeat Sid. I'm not going to focus on that main event because the best match on the card, just like the previous Halloween Havoc, the United States Tag Team title match between the Steiners and the Nasty Boys was the best match of the year, in my opinion. This match went 25 minutes. Uh, Jerry Sags had been busted open in the back, so the back of his head was bleeding. I think from I don't think it was a chair shot. It might have been from one of the stairs. But those guys, the Nasty Boys and the Steiners, put on a hell of a tag team match, and it's for the United States tag team title. It wasn't even for the NWA tag team title. That's how big the United States title tag team championship was, and that's how hot the feud was between the Steiners and the Nasty Boys. And but that was the best match on the card. That particular Halloween Havoc 1990. That same date, October 27th, 1991, WCW Halloween Havoc. We talked about the best matches on the card of WCW's Halloween Havoc. Well, in this one in 1991, you had Brian Pillman defeated Richard Morton to become the very first WCW light heavyweight champion. Someone named the Halloween Phantom defeated Tom Zank in 2 minutes. The Phantom, but later he won that bout against Tom Zank in under 2 minutes with a neck breaker that Tony Schiavone correctly called something like a rude awakening. And the man who be the Hollywood Phantom would take off his mask and would indeed, in fact, be Rick Rude.
Ugh.
But the main event, I said in before the previous Halloween Havoc, the best match on the card wasn't necessarily the main event. Well, the main event in this case was not the best match on the card, but maybe one of the worst matches of all time. It was the Chamber of Horrors cage match that involved Cactus Jack, Abdul the Butcher, a faulty switch, and an electric chair.
And the referee cam. Remember the referee cam?
The referee, yeah. But I'll let you and the wrestling fans put those pieces together. I gave you all the pieces. You just have to make them fit somehow.
Why? They didn't.
And they didn't. I said I was going to say if you can do that, then you're better than every WCW booker combined. But the 1990 October 27th, 1991 was the dreaded Chamber of Horrors cage match. Involving who was it? Was Vader, Abdul the Butcher, Cactus Jack, and
the Diamond Stud, Scott Hall,
and the Diamond Stud, Scott Hall. Wow.
Yeah.
And also in that match, the Master Blasters defeated the Wild-Eyed Southern Boys, Tracy Smothers and Steve Armstrong, and that would in fact be the pay-per-view debut of Kevin Nash.
Was it
one half of the Master Blasters?
Yeah, was it Kevin Nash and Al Green? Weren't they the Master Blasters?
Yeah. They were the Master Blasters. So that was the pay-per-view debut of Kevin Nash, all on the same card, October 27th, 1991, WCW Halloween Havoc.
But what a look into the future of the people who would become superstars in professional wrestling in the 90s, and it's like the catalyst was this garbage match and this garbage pay-per-view Halloween Havoc 91.
Yeah. And later on in this segment, Dan, we're going to get to a pay-per-view that also launched the careers of many people. But yeah, this particular Halloween Havoc, you had a lot of people that we didn't know at the time would go on to be huge stars. But on this particular day, they were on the undercard with good reason. That same day, October 27th, 1992, speaking of people that would become big stars later, October 27th, 1992, Shawn Michaels would defeat Davey Boy Smith to become the Intercontinental Champion. And this will be Shawn Michaels' first ever singles belt and the first WWE Championship in his career. So it happened October 27th, 1992. And finally, October 27th, 1996, Halloween Havoc 96, Dan, after the bout where Hulk Hogan defeated Randy Savage, the NWO's Hulk Hogan would defeat Randy Savage with some help from Ted DiBiase and the Giant. coming out to give a great promo would be making his WCW
Oh,
debut,
that's right.
Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
And they had a great exchange, Piper and Hogan would, and to the point where Piper said, "Please, they wouldn't love you if they didn't hate me so much." And furthering the fuel, who was really to blame for WrestleMania? You needed someone to boo, and that was me. But that would be October 27th, 1996, would be the WCW debut of Roddy Piper. October 28th, 1989, right here, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And 10 years ago today, Dan, we first met, but 30 years ago, October 28th, 1989, we were both in the same place at the same time. And that was at the first ever Halloween Havoc.
Yes, we were.
The main event, Ric Flair and Sting versus Terry Funk and the Great Muta. Seconds, Terry Funk Great Muta would be seconded by Gary Hart, and Ric Flair and Sting would be seconded by Ole Anderson. The referee for this bout, Bruno Sammartino.
You know how long it occurred to me, because I was 6 when I was brought to the show. And years later, it occurred to me that it was Bruno Sammartino in the ring, who basically caused the end of that match because Gary Hart tried to come in and run interference. And Ole Anderson intercepted Gary Hart and punched him, and thus throwing the towel in, and Bruno saw the towel and rang the bell, and that was it.
That was it. Yeah, but and for me, it was the fact that I was seeing Bruno Sammartino and Ric Flair in the same ring at the same time. That was a dream match of mine, and even seeing Bruno and Ole Anderson in the same ring at the same time.
Literally a ring riddled with wrestling royalty. That's hard for you. That's hard. Say that 5 times fast.
I will not.
No, don't do that.
But yeah, it was, and that was a another fraught with just technical difficulties. There was not supposed to be any fire in that building at all. Yet there were several fires in that building. When they lowered the electrified cage from the streamers from the Halloween decorations, why a wrestling match in these decorations, I don't know. But they caught on fire. And as it was being lowered, Tommy Young tried to put it out with a towel, and he burned his hand. And the Great Muta even had an assist with the green mist spraying it on the fire to put it out. They made mention of this fact on the WWE podcast, The Bump. It being the 30-year anniversary of the first Halloween Havoc. They showed that clip. Also, the Samoan SWAT team came out in their match before their match against the Midnight Express, did a fire dance that no one had told them beforehand that there was no fire allowed in that building at all. Because not only was there smoking, but there was no fire. So a couple laws were violated that night.
I mean, that building was like, for the last 20 years of that history, that building was a cinder away from burning down in the first place.
Yeah. One of the other great significant feats about that particular night, the very first Halloween Havoc in Philadelphia, that's still talked about to this day, was the Freebirds going up against the Dynamic Dude, and the Dynamic Dudes, the babyface team of Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas, being booed out of the building by the notorious heel-loving Philadelphia crowd.
Good, they deserve it.
But that was the very first Halloween Havoc, 1989 in Philadelphia. 6 years later, right back in Philadelphia. Speaking of fire, Dan, was the notorious ECW show where the line was really crossed. Um, there was a feud brewing between Tommy Dreamer and Cactus Jack. Cactus Jack still at this time was pulling double duty, wrestling in WCW and ECW, and said he was mad at Tommy for not taking that sweet WCW money like he did, and coming up to join him and in Ted Turner's suite. Tommy said he would never leave his fans, and Cactus said he wasn't going to wrestle, going to put his body on the line for these quote scumbags anymore. Scumbags meaning the fans of ECW. And he went on and he told the fans that he wanted to that he was going to give them a boring match. And he said, sit down, grab a bag of popcorn, and get ready for the most boring match you've ever seen. And he came to the ring with Raven, called Raven his best friend, and probably his only friend he's ever had. And when he wrestled Tommy Dreamer, it was a boring match. It's chanted boring, and Cactus, you led them in the chance of boring. There was headlocks, there was arm locks, wrist locks, and Cactus kept working the headlock. And even when a good spot was hit by Tommy, the crowd didn't really pop because of what it was and which was going on with Cactus. And finally, people started doing the wave, and then Raven came out and hits Tommy with a chair, and things started to pick up. And Cactus starts a WCW chant, and complete with trying to do the YMCA, making WCW with his arms. And he grabs the mic and he said, I made a vow to never put my body on the line again for you scumbags. And he holds up his taped hand and he said, can't you see I'm badly injured? And he asks that the match be declared a no contest. And he tells the fans, my favorite line of the night, thank you for coming and drive home safe. And he walks out of the ring.
I love that man so much.
Now, looking back at hindsight, this really should have been where the evening ended. But it didn't. The referee, Jim Molyneux, gets on the mic. I think the first time he'd ever got on the mic, and said, Cactus, I can't count you out. We don't have no contest here in ECW. And Cactus tells him to count him out. And said, we don't have count outs here either. And Jim Molyneux, of all people, said, Cactus, we got a lot of fans in the building here, but I don't know why you're being such a pussy tonight. They says you won't count him out. Out comes Bill Alfonso, who was playing the heel referee at the time, and being a big shot NWA referee, said, I'll count him out. And he starts to count, and then out comes Terry Funk and tells Bill, don't count him, and if you do, I forget what he said, but he got a huge pop from the crowd. What Funk will do to Alfonso if he starts to count. And then Funk gets on the mic and starts yelling out to Cactus to come out and calling it you don't got any guts. Where's your guts, Cactus? You make me sick. Your mother's a whore. Your old lady's a whore. Your son Dewey's a whore. God, Cactus, you gutless piece of... And out comes Cactus back, and they start brawling. And they start using chairs, of course. And Tommy comes out with a chair, hits Cactus, and Dreamer eventually gets laid out by Cactus. And Cactus is laying Funk out. And he grabs the crutch from ringside. And then Terry and Funk gets the metal crutch. And he hits Cactus right in the face with it. And the brawl keeps going on. And I think Beulah came out at one point, and she has brass knuckles, and Raven tapes him to his boot, and he hits Terry Funk in the nuts with the brass knuckles taped to his boot. But it really fell off the rails when Terry Funk went back to the dressing room and came back out with the flaming branding iron.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So the fans are popping big time because Terry's got this flaming branding iron, which looks great, but Terry's hitting people with the other side of the branding iron um, to make it look good. And there was like an eerie feeling to it. And again, fire where it really shouldn't be. Fire has no, I know it has no place in the Civic Center, but fire really has no place in a wrestling ring at all, especially not indoors, especially not in the ECW arena, an arena that only has 3 exits. 3. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, so Kerry Funk is cleaning house, hitting everybody with the burning branding iron in the stomach. Um, and Alfonso comes out and distracts Funk, and Raven hits him from behind and gets the flaming rod. And then the Cactus hits Terry with a nasty chair shot in the back. Um, and I remember just hearing it, just being shocked. And this is where the stupidity comes in because they brought out Raven and Cactus pulled out these chairs that had towels attached to it somehow. And these towels were soaked in lighter fluid or alcohol or some type of flammable liquid. And they used a branding iron to light the chairs on fire. And Cactus winds up and hits Dreamer with the chair, and Dreamer catches on fire. And the fans weren't even cheering. They were like, "What's happening?" And then Cactus tries to pick up this flaming chair. I don't know how he did it, but he winds up, and the chair, the flaming towel comes loose, and he throws the chair at Funk, and the chair hits Funk, but the towel goes out into the crowd. And with the chair hit Funk, so Terry Funk is literally on fire, and he's running around on ringside. Fans are trying to put him out. The towels are laying on the floor burning, and the crowd starts to go nuts. A few people came over with fire extinguishers that they shoot the towels, but they actually go into the crowd, making things worse. If one person, I was told, had suffocated, then it would have gone out. Instead, if one person had suffocated the flames, they would have gone out. But instead, they just, kept the flames going. And then the stupidest thing of all time happened. Dan, if that wasn't stupid enough, with fire going in different parts of the arena that only had 3 exits, they turned the lights out. Because we know we got to get to a big finish after all. No, heaven forbid they could have just called it here because there's already flames in the crowd.
Oh, God.
Different parts of the arena are on fire because of these flaming towels on the chair. But they turned the lights out. So there's already a panic. And the lights, it wasn't a flicker. They were out for about 2 minutes. Because they had to go to the end, which a lot of ECW fans will remember, of Raven crucifying Tommy Dreamer.
Jesus, this was
Dreamer.
all the same night?
It was all the same night.
Oh, my God.
Now, I don't know what Mr. Heyman was thinking. It was a mystery to me, but it was a major mistake. And at this point, people outside were coming out, and they were coughing from getting sprayed with the fire extinguisher. They're just coughing from the smoke inhalation already. People were bleeding from getting hurt in the melee. One guy broke his nose. Another guy I heard broke his leg. Some people were actually burned. Terry Funk and his wife came out, and he was taken to the hospital with 2nd-degree burns on his right arm, from his bicep to his elbow. But before that, Funk went ballistic backstage, throwing chairs that didn't have fire on them. And he was upset about how he would miss work, and he spent 3 months applying salve to his burns. And Tommy Dreamer suffered a broken nose and burns on his back. Cactus Jack felt very bad. backstage after what had happened, and a lot of people were pissed at ECW at the time, and even though there were a group of people chanting ECW, and this will be known as kind of what put ECW on the map, or really gave their reputation, but. This was a really, really dangerous night, and people did get hurt. I would say, good thing people didn't get hurt. People did get hurt, but
Well, at least
yeah,
they didn't die.
yeah. And people thought that death would be the next bump, after the flaming chairs.
Yeah, no kidding. I forgot that was all the same night. I really did. You know. Oh my God.
Yeah, October 28th, 1995, 24 years ago. October 29th, 1988, landmark date, professional wrestling. In New Orleans, Louisiana, the Road Warriors defeated the Midnight Express to win the NWA Tag Team Championship.
Oh, wow.
The Road Warriors are arguably the greatest tag team in the NWA in the 80s. Maybe the most influential tag team, one of the most influential tag teams of all time. This would be their only NWA Tag Team Championship. And they defeated the Midnight Express team of Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, whom a lot of people consider the best of the Midnight Express tag team. And that was their only NWA Tag Team Championship. But October 29th, 1988. Another historic date, a little thing that turned out to be really huge. October 31st, Halloween night, 1989, was the TV taping of WWF Saturday Night's Main Event in Topeka, Kansas. In that bout, on that particular telecast, the Rockers, Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels, would defeat the Brainbusters in a 2 out of 3 fall match. And what made this unique was this Saturday Night's Main Event wouldn't air until November 25th, 1989. And by November 25th, 1989, both Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson were gone from the WWF. Arn had wrestled his last match at the Survivor Series pay-per-view 2 days before the Saturday Night's Main Event aired, and Tully had failed a drug test November 2nd because of cocaine use. So on this date, Dan, October 31st, 1989, at this taping for Saturday Night's Main Event, when the Rockers took on the Brainbusters, this would be the last time ever that Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard would be a tag team. That would be their last match together.
In with a bang, out with a fizzle. And I still, that Ric Flair Horseman DVD, watching Tully talk about that and him referencing it on the interview we did with him years later on this program. I said program. I'm bringing that word back, by the way. You could tell he's heartbroken, Yeah. It sucks. That sucks. That's the word. It sucks.
It did indeed. And I still blame Jim Herd for suspending Tully Blanchard for failing a drug test in another company. And not bringing both of them back. But that would be the last time that Tully and Arn would ever be a tag team. October 31st, 1989. November 1st would have been the 75th birthday of the Brain, Bobby Heenan.
I mean, what do you say? What do you say? He's the greatest talent that wrestling's ever seen. And I would have said that.
Most definitely.
I would have said it before he died. I said it while he was alive. I'll say it now. Wrestler, announcer, manager, Bobby Heenan was better than everybody. Every single person, in ring, out of the ring, backstage. Bobby was the best. Period. In my opinion.
Yeah. And mine too, Dan, and a lot of people's. And I would say, save for Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel, he was 10 times better than every wrestler he ever managed, which is
Yeah.
saying something.
Yeah. Well, and Ric Flair.
And Ric Flair. But none of them could talk like Heenan.
Nope.
None of them could sell like Heenan. None of them could, or masters of ring psychiatry like Heenan. No one can work a crowd like Heenan.
Nope.
And that includes Ric Flair. That includes Nick Bockwinkel. That includes Ray Stevens. The, his ability to work a match, to work a crowd, to work a stadium, a TV viewer, just anyone, second to none. I'm glad we had him for as long as we did. It's really a shame that the last few years of his life he was silenced. But happy 75th birthday to Bobby Heenan, November 1st. Also on that same date, Dan, something very small, which turned out to be really big. Even though it was big at the time, we didn't know it. But on November 1st, 1997, the World Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion Bret Hart gave his notice to the WWF and signed a contract with WCW. This was kept under wraps. No one but Vince and the higher ups and WWF knew. And the plan was always for Bret to drop the title before he left for WCW. Of course, that was what he would have liked to have done, but as we'll find out later on this month, that's not exactly what happened. But it all started November 1st, 1997, when Bret Hart gave his notice to the WWF. This would all lead to Montreal and would all change the course of wrestling history. November 3rd, 1998, another significant day in politics. In 1998,
Oh yeah.
November 3rd, the former AWA Tag Team Champion shocked the world as the body, Jesse Ventura, would become the governor of Minnesota.
I have
Something
no
that would
comment.
open the. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I really don't have any comment past that. Other than you think he got an insight into how things work, why he's the conspiracy theorist that he is now. As he got the inner workings of all the BS, he's like, oh, okay, I see how it is.
Yeah, and kind of opened the floodgates for celebrities becoming governors.
I was gonna say stupid people being governors and stuff.
Yeah, and celebrities running for public office. Yeah, but yeah, 1990 November 3rd, 1998, running as an independent, neither Republican nor Democrat. Jesse Ventura became the governor of the great state of Minnesota. November 4th, 1988, very significant date because the movie John Carpenter's They Live was released November 4th. And it would become the first movie starring a professional wrestler to debut at number one. This was 25 years before The Rock did it. This is something that Hulk Hogan never did. Roddy Piper is the first professional wrestler to star in a movie that debuted at number one. They Live opened November 4th, 1988. November 5th, 1994. Coming back here to Philadelphia for another incredible angle that took place in ECW, and that centered around the Sandman. On this particular day, November 5th, 1994, November to remember, was to be the retirement of the Sandman, because the previous show he had been blinded by Tommy Dreamer. And Tommy Dreamer who felt terrible about the blinding of Sandman because no one had seen or heard from William Fullington, the Sandman's real name. He'd been holed up in his apartment. No one had seen him. He was, for all intents and purposes, blind. And Tommy Dreamer felt bad about ending this man's career, decided to dedicate the rest of his career to the Sandman and wrestling on behalf of the Sandman. Sandman was led into the ring by a woman, the late great Nancy Sullivan Benoit, and she told Sandman he was fired because she had a new wrestler, and it was going to be supposed to be the debut of her new wrestler.
That bitch.
But because, yeah, Sandman was blind, he was useless, and Tommy couldn't believe it. No one could believe it. What I really couldn't believe was Sandman wasn't blind. But he took off the bandages and he whacked Tommy Dreamer with that cane. The shot heard around the world. And this was, and if you notice in this wrestling historian, I mentioned ECW quite a bit and so many great memories that came out of ECW during these last 2 weeks in wrestling history. That blind Sandman angle was really the one that really kickstarted ECW being something different. For the way the Sandman sold it, for the way that people believed it, and this was in Philadelphia. This wasn't a major wrestling organization, and the fans ate it up. I ate it up, and it really kind of started the ball rolling on ECW being put on the map. Do you remember that? Where you were when that angle went down, Dan?
No, I don't. I remember the angle, but there's a few years there that blur.
Okay.
I just remember the how much went into convincing people.
Yeah.
That, like, he never left his house. He had other people run errands. He had his wife go out. Like, he literally disappeared from society to make sure you knew that the man was blind.
Yeah.
And you don't have, I mean, kayfabe is dead. And people are like, well, no, kayfabe's dead. Kayfabe's been dead for 20 years, folks. But when it was still alive, you didn't travel with, I'm not complaining. I'm not Jim Cornette complaining about it. Whatever. But, good guys would not travel with bad guys, vice versa. And if you were blind, you'd hide at home for however many months until the angle was over. And I do remember the revelation and the sound that made. And I mean the hit and the sound of that arena. I call it an arena. The sound of that warehouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the old cliche, they don't make them like they used to.
Yeah, that they don't, Dan. But, yeah, the blinding of Sandman angle was a very ahead of its time, and just, I mean, blinding had been done before. I mentioned on this very program about Junkyard Dog being blinded by the Freebirds.
That's another one I was thinking about. Yeah,
baby girl. Yeah, and fans were sending him money. Going to Jim Cornette's, fans sent Junkyard Dog almost $500 to help him out. They thought he was blind, and of course it came down to the fans were so loved Junkyard Dog and so hated the Freebirds that during the match where Junkyard Dog came to ringside blind, quote, against the Freebirds were beating down their opponents, and Michael Hayes, all he did was point at a blinded Junkyard Dog, and the fans went crazy, and one of them jumped over the guardrail with a gun. Told Junkyard Dog, it's okay, dog, I got him. And here, Junkyard Dog, is caught in the Jack Benny moment, your money or your life. I'm thinking, if I take down this guy with a gun, everyone knows I'm not blind. If I don't take down this guy with a gun and I continue to be blind, one of the Freebirds or all the Freebirds will get shot. Fortunately, the good people, the good New Orleans police officers were on board and no one was shot and the gun wasn't discharged. But yeah,
Phew.
blind wrestling angles, they are something else. Finally, on this date in professional wrestling, 25 years ago today, Dan, we talked earlier about pay-per-views and what happened on small earlier, wrestlers on pay-per-views, how they weren't known, might not have been known, but later on became big stars, or even on a packed pay-per-view card, a small match, a third match, or second match could steal the whole show that wasn't a main event. Well, this particular card that happened 25 years ago today may have been the greatest pay-per-view, uh, maybe match for match ever, because it's still talked about. It was AAA When Worlds Collide,
Mm.
produced by WCW. The commentary were Mike Tenay and Chris Cruz, Crispy Cruiser, and
Ugh. God, I hate
I
that guy.
remember, I remember this tape. This has been when wrestling tapes were traded and sold in earnest, because there was no internet, kids. There was no cable, no wrestling newsletters. This is all word of mouth.
Yeah.
And this card, When Worlds Collide, this was the first time American audience got to see Lucha Libre. And this was the first time American audience got to see some of the wrestling that we take for granted now. Now, this took place in Los Angeles at the Sports Arena in Los Angeles in front of 13,000 fans. AAA was selling out every month to the tune of 10 to 13,000 people, outselling both major wrestling companies, WWF and WCW.
Yeah.
And the wrestlers, yeah, and the wrestlers on this card making their people were seeing for the first time. Louis Spicolli, who wrestled on as Madonna's boyfriend, a great
Louis.
name. The Pegasus Kid, who we now know as Chris Benoit. Psychosis, Juventud Guerrera, Rey Mysterio. This is the first time. This is the first pay-per-view for all these wrestlers. This is the first time American audience got to see them. And the main event, one of the greatest tag team matches of all time, in one of the greatest pay-per-views of all time, Octagon and El Hijo del Santo took on Los Gringos Locos, Love Machine Art Barr, and Eddie Guerrero.
That's amazing.
Los Gringos Locos, Eddie Guerrero, and Art Barr were during this time in 1994. They were the most hated tag team, or the most over tag team in professional wrestling in any company. The crowd, the heat that they got just from the crowds in AAA alone were astounding. Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr were the hottest tag team in all of professional wrestling. And they wrestled Octagon and El Hijo del Santo in a 3 falls match. But each fall was an elimination bout, because the only way you could win a fall was you had to defeat both members of the team. And this is a concept or a match that hasn't been done since. And I don't know why, but it worked. But the match between those four was the highlight. And like I said, still 25 years later, it's an anniversary, may be the greatest pay-per-view match for match in wrestling history. And not to end this on a sad note, but it just happens to be it, this match would be the last match ever for Art Barr.
Yeah, man. Ugh.
So sad. He and Eddie were due to come into the ECW together. Eddie would end up going on his own and would start his career in ECW and would later go on to WCW and WWE into where we know him today. But he got his coming out was this card 25 years ago, AAA When Worlds Collide in Los Angeles. So fans of this podcast, if you've never seen AAA do that, if you've never seen Los Gringos Locos, Art Barr and Eddie Guerrero, please do yourself a favor and watch one of the greatest tag teams, one of the short-lived tag teams in history that could have gone on to be one of the greatest. But they were definitely the greatest tag team in 1994. They were the hottest tag team in professional wrestling. But 25 years ago today, when Worlds Collide first came on the airwaves, and some of the great wrestlers, the great wrestling style that you know today, Lucha Libre, the stuff you take for granted, this was the first time it was seen by American audiences 25 years ago today. And that, my friends, and you are my friends, is what's called the wrestling historian.
A lot of empty seats at AEW Dynamite tonight in Charlotte. That's that's disconcerting.
Yeah, that's Rhodes country.
Yeah. Didn't even think of that. It's Rhodes country. Well, I believe they're at Bojangles.
Okay.
I believe that's the Charlotte Checkers Arena. I could be wrong. That's not what that is it? That's not what that is. But that'll be interesting because they're playing because they're a rock band. They're at Baltimore Arena for Full Gear. I have a ticket this weekend. Yeah, they're playing at Baltimore Arena. Shut up, Craig. It's been a long episode. I have a lot to fix because the internet, because Comcast, there's nothing wrong with the infrastructure. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I did want to say this: in the next couple weeks, I will be getting a game that skipped my my grasp. My grasp. I can't talk anymore. Forget it. It escaped my grasp for years. The same year that WrestleMania 2000 came out for the N64, there was a little-known game, sarcasm, called Virtual Pro Wrestling 2. Have you heard of this game before?
I have not heard of this game before.
Okay, this is considered the other greatest wrestling game that was ever made. Alongside WWF No Mercy, I disagree, and it's WCW NWO Revenge, but it's the same engine, different wrestling. You know, I'm not going to argue the merits on that one. However, this has rosters from, like I said, it was released in 2000. It's basically the same game. Like, even the intro from this and WWF WrestleMania 2000 is the same, but the roster is completely different because you have All Japan, New Japan, Frontier Martial Arts, Michinoku Pro Wrestling, Fighting Network Rings, and Pride FC and other wrestling legends. Just to pull a few out. You mentioned Bart Gunn. Bart Gunn is in this game. No, you didn't mention Bart Gunn. I mentioned Bart Gunn. But you mentioned Johnny Ace earlier. Johnny Ace is in this game. Sorry, I was reading the wrong name. Big Van Vader, Stan Hansen, Gary Albright, Giant Baba, Andre the Giant, Jushin Thunder Liger, Dr. Wagner Jr., Scott Norton, Big Van Vader, The Great Muta, Terry Gordy, Terry Funk, Dory Funk, Dr. Steve Williams, Bruiser Brody, Mil Mascaras, Abdullah the Butcher, Ultimo Dragon, just to name a few, are on this game. And I ordered the N64 cartridge import from Japan. Should be getting in a few weeks. I'm really looking forward to that because I only heard about it. AJ Styles or Samoa Joe mentioned this game all of the time as being the best wrestling game that was ever made. Because of this game, that they were consultants on that the TNA Impact game that came out years ago for PS3 and the Xbox. And while it was a good game, Did not come out as they hoped, but this was the mold for that, and this is, of course, a game that a lot of American wrestling fans never played, and I'm looking forward to this. It was in a review video. I'm like, I got to get my hands on it. It can't be that expensive. It isn't. And the only way you can get around the what's the word I'm looking for? The Japanese restriction is you just take the back off. So you unscrew the Japanese. Wow. Yeah, because you know how videotapes have the little tabs on it, like in cassette tapes have the tabs. It's the same kind of basic deal with Nintendo 64 cartridges, where the tabs on the back of the U.S. cartridges are different than where they are all over the different parts of the world. So essentially what you do is you take a screwdriver that matches the screws on the back of apparently Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and N64 cartridges. Take the back off and replace it with an American cartridge back, and it'll be unlocked for your N64. Boom, done. That's wow. It. That's it. Alongside one other game, this was the most imported game in the early 2000s. For the N64, the other one being Sin and Punishment. That's how good of a game and how big this game is. So I never played it. 19 years later, I'm gonna finally get my hands on it. Just those names alone, plus All Japan and New Japan wrestling legends. Hiroshi Tenzan's in it. Chono's in it. Masahiro Chono, Keiji Muto. You know, Muta without the makeup. It's just a who's who. So, Yuji Nagata, remember him? He's in it. Oh,
I have the Nagata lock. Yeah.
Yes, and I forgot. Mike Awesome's in this game.
Awesome.
Yeah. Hey, no pun intended, or maybe it was. So yeah, I had to mention that, you know, on the tail end of wrestling historian, and the fact that there's nobody in AEW right now. That's I mean, there's a lot of people there, but it's just as well as a Raw or SmackDown, which is not great going into their first pay-per-view since being on TV. That's just my observation. We'll talk about that next week based on how it goes this weekend. With that being said, Craig, as long as you don't have anything else, where do people follow you, sir?
They can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter at Craig Ligons, CraigLiGeons. If you like that comic book stuff, you can follow me at Comic Book Gurus Podcast on WMMR.com and wherever podcasts are sold for free. We just recently celebrated our 100th episode. So, could not have done it without you, Dan. Thank you.
I just forgot there was video on and you saw me doing a literal round of applause, but you can't.
Yeah, I felt the roundness in my heart.
Yes, congratulations to you and one Steve Morrison, who was the brainchild of this whole thing.
Yes, with his idea, he wanted to do he liked original content, and he wanted to do a podcast, and they needed the material, and it's like, hey, I like that those Marvel movies seem to be a big hit for all the kids, and I'd like to do a comic book podcast. So he asked me first, not Rockstar Rob, and the rest is history.
I mean, nobody asked Rockstar Rob first for anything.
No.
Follow me on Twitter at DanLaw83. The HIAC Talk Radio Network is at all social media platforms at HIACTalkRadio.com. Go to thebradyhicks.com or VOC Nation Radio on iTunes to listen to the audio segment, and of course uploaded to YouTube. And on the weekend, just search DanLaw83 on YouTube. For Craig Ligons, I am the above average comedian Dan Calchico. We will see you next week. Have a good one.